Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Kind of funny, before the holiday weekend, the last video I did was talking a little bit about the Taylor Swift Eras Tour announcement. Here we are back from the holidays and we're still talking about it, but it's been that big of a deal, right? So that's why we're saying, hey, how much money is a SWIFTQUAKE? Just a little play on words. Obviously, she had that showing in Seattle a while back that actually registered. Basically, her fans effectively registered on the seismic scale, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, obviously, you all know by now this is a huge, huge deal. We're seeing apes talking about this anywhere from, I don't know, being basically like adding a movie in the quarter to kind of erasing AMC's need to even issue shares. Well, there's a lot of miles and a lot of gap in between those two statements. So just how big is this thing? We're going to talk about that today. Got a few new followers, so if you've been around a minute, please just permit me to repeat something I've said quite a bit on this channel. Just go with me. So for the new followers, I have a background in forecasting. I have a couple of master's degrees in business, spent a lot of time in the corporate world managing some businesses where I led teams that were forecasting business and effectively deciding how much product to buy and sell and that kind of stuff. So that's where I've got a bit of a background on this, but it doesn't mean I'm right. And so people who've been around a while would be probably almost tired of me saying there is a saying in forecasting, which is if you have a forecast, it's wrong. And that doesn't mean you're bad at forecasting. That just means you're predicting the future. Anybody who can actually predict the future, would be a mega billionaire, right? Because you could just accurately place bets and make a whole lot of money. So the fact that I am not talking to you as a mega billionaire should tell you that plenty of my forecasts are wrong. And what's more is, I've been very accurate with movie revenue forecasts. I've been kind of dialing that in, been an ape for almost 3 years now. You can find all the receipts on that. In fact, here's an example. I told everybody more than a year before it happened that Q2 would be a profitable quarter. So nailed that one. There's one in my corner, one in my column really. But there's plenty of other things I've gotten wrong. And then what's harder here is, while I may be able to forecast movies and AMC's revenues and those kinds of things, this is something really unprecedented, right? This is really big. Taylor and Adam have kind of flipped a whole industry on its head. We're taking a movie exhibitor, AMC, and turning them into a distributor, which is what's causing so much noise and effectively an earthquake in the industry of shifting who kind of has distribution rights, who's making money off of all that. And big deal, really in our favor if you're an AMC stockholder. If you're a Swiftie listening to this, welcome. We just honestly love what you guys are doing and would love if you'd check us out. We're basically here just trying to have some fun and stop some bad guys from being bad guys. That's something I think that's worth checking out. So let's talk about a few things first. I mentioned this is kind of unprecedented and different. So I am not going to sit here and tell you that I know what the numbers are. What I'm going to tell you is how I got to my number, my forecast. I'm going to allow you to have a chance to decide where you agree or disagree with my numbers, and to kind of come up with your own and assess what your impact is. So little play on words here too, just only the hairdresser really knows. I guess typo there, that should say hairdresser. So all my forecasts are a guesstimate. There was a time I just remembered this tweet, so I wanted to pull it up. Someone who's been a fairly positive ape on Twitter. Love the positive vibes, especially since, we're all fighting a lot of corruption. You need some folks who kind of help keep positive energy out there. So Stephanie I just recalled, she had tweeted when Adam was in, I think this may be when he was in London. I could be wrong there. But anyway, she had him sign her pants, which was kind of a little funny thing for a lot of us to see. But you can see her tweet back in the day was kind of about, she was asking him about cryptic messages, and he said, only the hairdresser really knows if a blonde is actually a blonde. What I'm really saying here is only Adam really knows, and perhaps his accounting team, and if there's anybody who's kind of in finance there, Sean Goodman, our CFO, those kinds of things. Only the sort of maybe leaders at the top on the inside really know, have a good idea of how much money AMC might make. I'm just going to give you an outsider's perspective based on, I'm actually going to give you some inputs onto how I got to my number, and we'll get there. So take this with a big grain of salt. Don't just trust me, bro, today. Don't take my numbers and run with them. All right, the other thing is we need to confirm this is Q4 revenue. I think a lot of people were very excited, me included, at how high the pre-sales were. We're actually going to talk about that as an input to my numbers. And so those pre-sales are happening now, right? We're in the middle of Q3. So some people felt like, okay, we're selling tickets now. That's money that shows up in Q3. Well, AMC collects the cash. That part is true. But there's something you can see my tweet on the left, which was like the day of the announcement or whatever. I was kind of saying, hey guys, you need to know there's something in kind of corporate accounting which is called revenue recognition. And you tend to not count revenue until the thing happens that caused the revenue. So in this case, October 13th is opening night. It's the concert itself that is kind of creating this revenue. So you don't get to count it here in August and September because the revenue is tied to an event. That event is happening in October. So it's just kind of an accounting principle so that people can't cook books and move numbers across different quarters to make numbers look better wherever they want them. It creates consistency is what it does. And so then you can see on the right, here was an ape. I've mentioned sometimes on this YouTube when I share people's tweets, I'm not trying to pump their account. In some cases, they're people I really know and trust. In other cases, I'm just trying to give credit because someone maybe was the first to share it or whatever. So don't take either of these last two slides as me pumping anybody, but just giving credit to, I guess, Angela here, someone I've seen out there for a while as well. She had smartly just gone ahead and emailed the company rather than all of us out there arguing over whether this is Q3 or Q4. She went ahead and just asked the source, right? Go to the source. No, trust me, bros. And so sure enough, John Merriweather, head of investor relations for AMC, said this the revenue is being tied to Q4. One note on that, I went ahead and read some of what I could find on the agreement out on the internet. It is possible for this to run as far as 13 weeks before it goes to streaming, and that would carry it into Q1 of next year as well if it was to run that long. I'm going to go ahead and kind of take a look at really just Q4 today, but anything in Q1 of next year, then that would kind of be gravy as well, and we can come back to that later. All right, so here's some comparisons. Let's just kind of think about this. I took a look at Barbie and The Little Mermaid for different reasons. Barbie, just because obviously that's been so huge and had so much energy around it. And so let's just see what that is. Before we kind of maybe go farther, one more thing. You'll notice I'm looking at weekends here. Remember that AMC is effectively only showing this on Thursdays through Sundays. So basically this is a weekend showing every weekend. I suppose you can call those 4-day weekends, so that's great, and maybe another tie-in to some past possible cryptic messaging. I guess that was 4-day weeks, not 4-day weekends. But anyway, we're not going to be having showings Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right? So take those days out. That's going to matter in our revenue forecast. You've got basically holes where other movies would be showing all week. We'll kind of come back to that. But so let's look at Barbie. Let's look at Little Mermaid. You can see the kind of comparison of their opening weekends. On the right, Little Mermaid was 96 million on its opening weekend. For just some perspective, I'm seeing sort of industry forecasts of the Taylor Swift Eras Tour movie. I don't know what we want to call that. Concert recording. Anyway, there are industry forecasts that seem to say anywhere from, say, 70 million all the way up to like 100 million for opening weekend. So that 100 million mark, Little Mermaid was close to that. And then Barbie was just huge. Opening weekend was 162. But the next thing we need to think about in forecasting is how well do these hold up? So in the industry, that's called legs, or you can call it a hold. And so you can see here, like Barbie, the second weekend was 57% of the first weekend. So in other words, it dropped, 43%. So it's 93 million the second weekend. Or you can see interesting. Actually, guys, I just noticed this. This is completely not on purpose at all. I swear to you. You remember that AMC's cut is 43% and the Swift's cut is 57%. And look at these two. I'm discovering this as I share it with you guys, that Little Mermaid had a 43% hold and Barbie had a 57% hold. That's pretty interesting. Swear to you that was not on purpose. Huh. Okay, well anyway. Sometimes there's random coincidences all through this journey, aren't there? All right, stop nerding out, retail. Let's come back to the point. All right, so you can see like Little Mermaid dropped a little over half and then was 41 million the second weekend. So you can kind of see just from week to week. So then comparing to the weekend before it. So the third weekend of Barbie compared to the second weekend, you note it dropped 43% again. We're holding 57%. So it's kind of like a little more than half. So the third weekend at 53 million is a little more than half of that second weekend at 93 million. If you're into science, it's like this idea of a half-life, only it's not a half. You can see it's just different amounts. But the point is, we're dropping every week from the week before it. So how fast do you kind of go back down towards zero? You never really get to zero on these movies. You just get to that point where it's small enough, they start taking screens away from it, and then you start thinking about putting it on streaming, putting it on digital. And so you can see the first 7 weekends, I'm just looking at that because actually it was a little bit of an arbitrary, I just drew a line in the sand, but I'm going to share more than 7 weekends when I get to the Taylor Swift forecast, don't worry. I'm going to go to the end of the year, the end of Q4, which I want to say was 9 or 10 weekends. Maybe it was even 11. Anyway, so you can see in the first 7 weekends, Barbie had $388 million domestic. Remember, domestic's going to matter too, because this concert, so far AMC's only announced it in Canada, the US, and Mexico. So it's not global, which also is going to matter for our forecast. And then you can see Little Mermaid, about 189. So also interesting to note that on both of those, you get roughly double, little more than double, the opening weekend if you add up all the first 7 weekends. So just for some comparison, and I think the key here is just to note, you don't just keep the same level week in and week out. And by the way, that matters too, even in Barbie, because I saw a lot of apes talking about some very, very high numbers for the domestic box office this quarter. And I kind of wanted people to remember these movies, even if they're doing awesome. These are amazing legs for Barbie, no pun intended. But 64% hold, 62, 72% hold, almost 70. Same thing happened for Mermaid. Look at it about it's kind of a month in. All of a sudden, 77% legs, 63, 68. So these are movies that held up well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the Taylor Swift concert and how it might hold up too. So these are just some good comparisons, and they give you an idea of the total size compared to the opening weekend number. So just remember that too, and play around for yourself on what do you think the opening weekend is, and how much can it kind of hold from week to week. So in other words, how much does it go down by? Or how much does it keep? All right, let's go through a list of things I was thinking about as I forecast this. So first off, this is more of a concert, right? So how are we comparing this to a movie? And how does the forecast, how should it be the same? How should it be different? And you can see I've just put a question mark here. No idea. I have not seen a concert like this. Now, AMC has had a few things, like there was the Coldplay concert. There's been some Metallica concerts. Chance the Rapper did his thing that one time. So there's been a few things like that, but I've never seen one where it's a little bit more acting like this big movie event, and it's carrying out a whole bunch of weeks. And we're going to even take a look here in a minute at some real ticket sales in some specific theaters, just to get an idea of what the heck is happening out there. But I'm telling you right now, I don't know necessarily how to compare this to a movie. If I go back to that Barbie and Little Mermaid, does it look the same as these? Does it look different? I don't know. So you're going to have to think through how you feel about that. And then I'm just going to give you a bunch of sort of pluses and minuses here. So remember, this is weekends only, like I said. Now, I think as a percent hold, what I just talked through with Barbie and Little Mermaid, I think that actually helps, because instead of having, basically people can't go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They can only buy those Thursday through Friday seats. And so I have a feeling there's a certain amount of people who might have otherwise gone Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday who cannot. So now it kind of props up each weekend a little more. Maybe that hold is a little better than it might otherwise have been. But also, that's 3 days a week you're erasing out. So there's some people who maybe would have gone on Monday and again on Saturday or something like that. Or there's other people who just only have Tuesdays off or whatever. Tuesdays are a discount day is another example, and those tend to be the biggest weekday of the week. Well, those are just gone. And so, there's this concept in like capacity planning in operations. There's a capacity to sell tickets, and if you're, shutting down 3 out of the 7 days a week, you've reduced your capacity. So that does probably bring the total overall down, as opposed to it going all day or every day of the week. So there's kind of a mix and match there. This is domestic only. So if we were comparing this to a global release, we're going to have to think about, if you're forecasting AMC's global revenues, AMC has a lot of theaters in Europe in particular and in other spots around the world. And that we get those royalties from Saudi Arabia, all that kind of stuff. So this is not a global release yet. I'm going to use that word yet. With as successful as it is, I would not be surprised if people are trying to work out basically legal contractual details to perhaps make this global. I would love to see that, but you get into distribution rights around the globe, and there can be all kinds of weird stuff that I've just seen from the corporate world. Let's put it that way. So domestic only, so that impacts our overall forecast. Pre-sale, you guys have seen the I don't know, the press releases, and I'm going to talk about that. We're going to look at a couple of those. This is an all-time high on pre-sales, higher than Spider-Man No Way Home, higher than Star Wars Force Awakens, and we're going to go ahead and look at a couple numbers on that. So that's a big deal. And so if pre-sale is some kind of indication of what opening weekend might look like, just take note that these pre-sales of tickets were an all-time high for any movie ever. So that's pretty wild. I'm noting that this is probably a bit of a target audience. Now I'm going to talk out of both sides of my mouth on that one. So we're talking about Swifties, right? So this is not, if you take, I don't know, a Marvel movie or I don't know what else is, well, Barbie, Mario. These are movies that have wide reach across, I don't know, genders, age groups, social groups, whatever. Perhaps the Taylor Swift movie, concert, has a bit of a targeted audience. It's targeted for Swifties and in some cases maybe their parents who are going to take them. Now, here's the thing, very next line. This is a freaking phenomenon. This thing is huge. We talked about how her fans, made an earthquake. I think the concert tour is maybe the biggest ever. It's kind of like, I don't know, well over $1 billion and maybe even into the billions in terms of economic impact. You can find a lot of articles and even research about that because this is just a huge phenomenon. So while on the one hand, if you're forecasting, you're thinking about, well, does this have the reach that, say, a Barbie or a Mario or a Spider-Man No Way Home has in terms of a really broad audience? But on the other hand, man, Swifties is a really big group. I showed the other day on a tweet where I think Taylor's tweet about the concert had like 50 million views. A big tweet for me might be 50,000 views. So we're just not the same. I'm just, laughing because that's beyond obvious. But anyway, it's huge, and I'm asking myself, okay, but how huge is it? Maybe that's a good way to look at those last two lines. All right, so it is in limited theaters. This should not be an up arrow. Sorry about that. This should be kind of a down arrow. AMC announced, some partnerships with, I think it was like Cinemark, Cineworld, Regal. There's a maybe it was as many as like 5 theater chains, but it's not all, right? So this isn't, again, like a Spider-Man No Way Home or a Barbie or a Mario that's going to just show in like pretty much every single theater there is. It's not every single theater. It's a little bit more limited, so you've got less doors. Think back to that capacity. Less days, less doors. All right, so but AMC's market share, this is my own assumption. This is not a fact here. I'm telling you an assumption. Because AMC is the core distributor, because it was AMC's idea, AMC's partnership with the Swift family, AMC got the jump on the announcement, I just would assume if you take AMC's normal market share for a movie, which, let's say it's roughly half in the US, don't quote me on that, I'd need to go double check that number, it's been a little while. I'm just going to assume that whatever the normal market share is for a movie for AMC, that in this case, it's higher than average. AMC is going to get a bigger piece of the pie than usual. And that's going to matter in a few minutes when we kind of talk about AMC's cut. Speaking of cut, AMC gets a cut from competitors. So regardless of the market share, if people go see this at a Regal or a Cinemark or whatever, then AMC is getting a portion of those revenues. That also matters in our forecast. Almost done with this kind of boring part, guys. Also, speaking of cut, then AMC's cut from the Swifts versus what they normally take in a movie. If you don't know, and I'm going to kind of point this out in more detail here in a few minutes, but AMC typically keeps, let's say, around half of ticket sales. So when you go see a movie, AMC kind of keeps around half. It's a little more than half sometimes, and sends the rest back to the studios who made the movie. Well, in this case, AMC is sending 57% back and keeping that 43%. So there's that number again. AMC is keeping a 43% cut of the ticket sales. So that's a little less than usual. We have to take that into account for when we try to get to AMC's number, which is the point of this video. All right, and then merch, I'm just going to assume that Swifties are excited about this, and that AMC has been trying to prepare in terms of volume. Adam said on a recent earnings call they'd start going deeper on some merch, in other words, having more units available. On the other hand, this has all happened really fast. So you could argue perhaps that product will be limited. But I also saw a post somewhere on the internet where, I think it was limit like 10 per customer. Normally we see a lower number than that. Like I think with the Spider-Man, there were the buckets of like Gwen and Miles Morales. Those were maybe like limit 2 per customer or something like that. So limit 10 per customer tells me hopefully there's kind of a decent quantity out there. And perhaps I'm going to call that more than usual. That's this slightly green arrow here. Okay, let's talk about a few things more. I said I'd go into details, so let's talk about those pre-sales. This was just an article I found. You can kind of go out and Google this, find more information. So at just AMC, you can see kind of this first part that I've highlighted. It broke the record for all-time high on pre-sales, and that was beating Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, if you remember, AMC offered the NFT. I think that was the first NFT we did. We were all pretty excited about that. I logged in myself. It was, 10 or 11 p.m. West Coast time. I stayed up to, try to get in. The website was crashing. We were all trying to get in there. We had wait times. You had to wait in line to buy your tickets. That was a big deal. Well, that was actually Taylor Swift is $26 million. So she beat Spider-Man No Way Home when Adam was offering us these NFTs and, apes. It was kind of maybe an all-time high in terms of our energy and engagement on social media. That's 2021. So pretty big deal to beat that number. And then you can see, go down a line or two, if you add in all the chains, so it says including Regal and Cinemark and some others, then Swift has also taken down Star Wars Force Awakens, and you can see that's $37 million of pre-sales. Now, this article was posted a few days ago, and since then I'm going to show you these things keep selling. You guys have not stopped buying up these tickets. So big deal, just as an input to our forecast, all-time highs on pre-sales, which allows us to kind of compare. So let's look at what happened with No Way Home and with Force Awakens. So you can see No Way Home, the domestic opening weekend was $260 million. Pretty freaking big. The first 7 weekends, we're kind of going to keep comparing apples to apples on that. First 7 weekends were $478 million. So here again, we get, in this case, a little less than double of that opening weekend. That just happens with Marvel movies, by the way. They tend to be really, really front-loaded, and then they drop hard for a week or two until they kind of find those legs we talked about. But anyway, $260 million opening weekend, $478 million across the first 7 weekends, just for domestic. So, all right, Star Wars Force Awakens, domestic opening weekend. Now, remember, this is a 2015 movie, so we're comparing kind of an old dollar value. If you kind of factor in inflation, this is really probably bigger than Spider-Man No Way Home. But we're going to just look at straight up dollars here. So that was $248 million on the opening weekend. You can see the first 7, so you can tell already this had much stronger legs than No Way Home. Also can sometimes depend on what time of year a movie is released. But anyway, Star Wars had a $582 million first 7 weekends. Now that's going to matter because as we think about how big do we think Taylor is for the first weekend, and then for, say, these first 7 weekends or for the entire, like I said, 10 or 11 weekends or whatever we have for all of Q4. I had that in my spreadsheet. I just don't want to hop over there for you. Anyway, you could kind of say, well, all right, here's what No Way Home did, and what do I think Taylor is compared to that? Here's what Star Wars did. What do I think Taylor is compared to that? I gave you as well, of course, we weren't talking pre-sales here. Sorry for all the clicks. Barbie and Little Mermaid. So now we've got 4 movies. We're kind of looking at their opening weekend, looking across their first 7 weekends, and you start to have some places you can maybe draw some comparisons. That's what we're doing here. But with that input that pre-sales, if it's any demonstration of energy, enthusiasm, how many people are going to show up, this pre-sale input is the biggest there's ever been in history. That's another SWIFTQUAKE. All right, so let's look at a few theaters. I just wanted to pull up a few random. I swear to you these were random. I don't even remember how I picked a couple of these cities. There's one that wasn't totally random. We'll get to that. All right, so Minneapolis, I looked at both the opening day. So here you go. You can see like IMAX is sold out for the 7:15 showing. This was just one. You can see this is Eden Prairie Mall. If that's you, then shout out. But anyway, to our Minneapolis apes. The IMAX showing at 7:15 is sold out. I clicked on that 11 o'clock showing. It's pretty full. You can see there's I don't know what Prime Perceive the Power is, some kind of other premium type of showing. I don't have that at my theater. Anyway, the 6 o'clock sold out, the 9:30 almost full. And then look at the bottom, those digital showings. We do have that at mine. Almost all of them sold out. The 10:15 almost full. So basically the entire opening night is sold out. Pretty wild. But hey, how about 3 weeks later? And here's the point. Remember I talked about those legs that hold. How well is this going to hold up? And we asked, does it hold like a movie or not? This is a concert. Are we sure people are going to want to come back 3 weeks in? Well, holy cow, look at this. Same theater. I think this was the IMAX room I grabbed. See if I can see that on here. I'm not positive. I can't swear that to you. If you're from Eden Prairie, you probably know which room this is by the shape of the seats. But you can see Friday, October 27th. This is our third weekend. Look at that room. There's almost no seats available unless you want the front row, or if you needed, an assisted seat, basically. Wild, wild. This is already now, what are we? September 5th, I'm recording this. For the third weekend out, it's already selling out in Minneapolis, at least at this one theater. Well, let's look at a few more. How about Dallas? So that was the third Friday night. Let's look at a third Saturday. Holy cow, look at that. This is, where are we at? North Park 15, if you're in Dallas, shout out to you. I got a ape friend in Dallas, probably more than one, but at least one that I know for sure. Anyway, so shout out to you, Dallas apes. Look at this. Here we are. This is Saturday at noon. This isn't like some, let's go out for the evening. This is the middle of the day. Saturday at noon in Dallas. That's a big room, too. You can see how many seats that is. Packed full. I mean, all you're going to get is kind of the front couple rows at this point if you want to go to that one. 3 Saturdays in. That's some big legs. All right, how about St. Louis? Also the third Saturday. Boom. Full room. What is this? Streets of St. Charles. Shout out to the St. Louis apes. Saturday, October 28th. This is 7 o'clock at night. Almost no seats left. 3 weeks in. Let's go back, actually, to Spider-Man. Again, sorry for all the clicks. Actually, no. Where were we? Okay, there. I mentioned the huge drop for Marvel. $260 million opening weekend, but then the next 6 weeks were not even as much as that. Another 218. But then we look at Taylor, 3 weeks in, 3 weeks in. Oops, skipped ahead. Had 3 of those. Where's the other one? There. 3 weeks in on the right there. Full, full, full. What the heck? This feels like something to me. I'm just going to be honest. And in fact, I will tell you now, as I was going to look at these, this is probably a mistake. Sometimes in forecasting, if you let emotions into the mix, you can get numbers wrong. But I was seeing these and I took my numbers up. Like literally, I had prepped everything to talk to you guys, was just kind of putting these into the slides. And then I'm like, what is going on? And seeing 3 weeks out look like this made me decide to bring my numbers up. I'm not going to, I don't know, I guess I'll just share that with you is the point. All right, but how about, so those are cities, right? I just looked at Minneapolis, I looked at Dallas, I looked at St. Louis. But okay, retail, cities have high populations. What about the burbs? So, all right, how about the burbs? Here's one here in Oregon. This is not in a big town. You can look up this theater. The city it's in is like 90,000 people. It's surrounded by a few other suburbs. So maybe you want to say it's, I don't know, 300,000-400,000 people in the area. But some of those would have to drive 40-50 minutes to get to it. And so, unless they're apes, they're not doing that. I can tell you right now, this is one I've attended quite a bit. And it tends to not, I'm guessing it's actually a lower performing property. Let's put it that way. It was actually bought from another company. You can tell I'm an Oregon ape, so I just know these things. It was bought from another company that went under, unfortunately for AMC, I think they bought it in 2019 and you know what happened right after that. But thankfully AMC's held on to it, so I get to be a loyal ape and drive over there sometimes. But look at this. So here's opening night on the left for Taylor Swift. I just compared that to here in a couple days we have opening night for A Haunting in Venice, which I plan to take my mom to. We both like Poirot. We like detective movies. It'll be kind of fun. there's not even one seat sold yet for Poirot. Now, before we get negative or some shill runs with this, that's not that uncommon. It's not that big a deal. It's not a Marvel movie. It doesn't have kind of the pre-sales. We'll see this sell. And my mom and I will show up and get a couple seats. I'm not going to tell you what day or time I'm going to do that. But anyway, I'm not concerned, but I'm just wanting to show you. Look at Taylor on the left. I'm showing you, all the way out in October, and here's Poirot this week. That's the power of Taylor. There's not one seat. I mean, you can see there's the disabled seats, wheelchair seats, but that's it. There is not one seat in that room. This is a GXL room, so you can see how big it is, how many seats there are. And then look at the right. We could say, all right, fine, that's opening night. But let's look. Here we are again, 3 weeks out. And again, I'm telling you, this is a theater that does not do this. I've not ever seen this, not even for a Marvel movie. When Spider-Man was out, I guess this is a trust me, bro. But if you trust me, I was checking this kind of stuff at my theater, and it was not sold like this. So look at the far right. It's already, 40% sold or something, maybe 33. 3 weeks out in the burbs. All right, so we know it's selling. We got it, retail. We got it. Okay, let's talk through some numbers before we get to the real meat. So normal cut of admissions, I mentioned to you, AMC usually keeps about 50 to 52%. That's actually in their financial filings, by the way. You can look at basically the cost of films. I didn't quite quote that line right, but effectively you can go find an expense in there. So if you just take the admissions and you take that cost of showing the films, I think it's just called film costs. Anyway, you can figure out exactly how much of a cut AMC keeps every quarter. I've got the last 20 quarters or something at this point, all the way through kind of 2018. Well, they keep 50 to 52%. So for the Eras tour, keeping 43%, so that lets us do some math. But we know that AMC is keeping a cut of competitors, so no idea how much that number actually is. Just going to say that off the top. I went ahead and used 25%. So I just said, there's a cut that those theaters have to send back, and AMC is keeping a cut of that cut, and then the Swifts get the rest. So I've used 25%, but I have no idea if that's correct, guys. So we're going to have to figure that out. Right there's, a big open question. But just so you know, I used 25% of their cut of competitors. For merch. So we know that AMC keeps their revenue minus expenses. They're not sending any back to the Swifts. I've seen that in a couple articles, so as long as we can trust that, this is just AMC gets to keep the money. I'm letting you know right now. Here's my numbers. I went ahead with about 275,000 of those buckets. If you remember for Ant-Man one day, I think Adam said, hey, we sold, it was like 200 or maybe 220,000 of those buckets, like right off the bat. So this is a pretty, we've seen this type of number before, let's put it that way. I'm just sort of going back and forth in my own head. I know for sure, I shouldn't say I know, but I believe very strongly Swifties would buy more than this. But I don't know how many they were able to ramp up, how quickly. And then what's more, what the strategy is for AMC. Of course, you'd like to sell out. You don't want to end up with excess inventory, that kind of stuff. So I'm just using a made-up number here that I made up. You plug in your own number. You can see the posts on what those are selling for. And then I did 300,000 on the cups. Those are a little less money, so I thought, well, maybe some more people will buy those. So I got a feeling they could beat those if they wanted, but I don't know if they were able to even ramp up physical production in time to make more than that. So it could be less than that, too. You're going to have to decide what you think. Food and beverage. I just used, if you kind of look at past movies, because I've been forecasting this so long, you can kind of get into what's the normal attendance rate. And then based on how many people attend, how much money are they spending on food and beverage. So I'm just telling you right now, I kind of use normal attendance and then normal food and beverage spending to just get that number. And then for the total quarter, I've also got to think through, basically for that bottom line, there's also a cost to these guys being open for us. So I called, this is kind of keep the lights on, or you'd see it as operating expenses. Here I called it operating costs. So you've got someone who maybe opens the door for you, someone who serves you the popcorn, someone who cleans up the room when everybody's done, someone who scans your tickets, the cost of the electricity, the cost of water and sewer, all this stuff. So there's operating expenses for all of us to go attend this, and you got to factor that in too. All right, finally, let's get to some numbers. What I've done is I've just had my own sort of low, mid, and high case. This is what you do a lot of times in forecasting. You kind of scenario out. So that's why this middle I'm calling expected. What that means by expected is that's the number I'm using. I'm going to be honest though. I mean, think back to the Spider-Man number, the Star Wars number, even Barbie. If we think about the types of opening weekends we've seen and the response we've seen from Swifties here, man, these numbers could even be low. Now, granted, I've seen the industry saying maybe 70 to 100 million, so I think I'm in the zone here. I'm using that 100, and even that seems to be above some industry forecasts, but because of the level of energy I'm seeing, I'm just going to go ahead and go with a bit of a bullish number. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's scenarios in my mind where we beat even what I'm calling the high number. I don't know. Let's just see. All right, so the weekend totals across the entire quarter then. These are, if we hit these opening weekends, here's my personal forecast based on, what I talked to you about those legs and that hold and all that. I've kind of got some guesses at those holds that are sort of Barbie-like pretty high holds. And if we do those, and I ended up saying a little higher even because I said, all right, these are only weekends. You can't go during the week, so they're going to hold a little higher. And then just from what I showed you a minute ago, from 3 weekends in 4 different cities, how it's selling very well. So here's the numbers. Basically, if you get these opening weekends, you get these bottom line totals. So an opening weekend of 80 or 100 or 165 gets you a bottom line, like a total quarter admissions of 200, 265, and 417. Now remember, I'm doing that across everybody. That's not just AMC. So that includes Regal and Cinemark and Cineworld, and that's just the whole domestic number. So I'm calling this a WAG. WAG means I'll call it a wild butt guess, just pulling it out of your rear on everything that I've just told you, right? So again, only the hairdresser really knows whether this thing is blonde or not. So only Adam and team know probably roughly the size of this. I'm sure even they have scenarios because this is new, this is different. But so I'm using that middle scenario. What does that add up to for AMC? These are my wild guesses. Hopefully my wild guesses are more accurate than some, but we're going to find out because I'm putting this out there. All right, so AMC admissions portion. So when we go just to AMC, I think the ticket sales are going to be around 64 million. This is from that middle scenario there, that $100 million opening weekend, and then the total for the quarter of 265 for domestic. AMC's cut from competitors, I'm calling 29 million. AMC's merch sales, I'm calling not quite 8. And then the food and bev, I'm calling that a lift. In other words, if you didn't have this movie, you'd make that much less. So by having Taylor out there, I think AMC will sell maybe as much as $51 million more food and beverage than they normally do. So the total contribution, if you add up all of that, basically what's the impact of adding Taylor, having a SWIFTQUAKE, just to AMC is $151 million in revenue. That is huge, you guys. That's huge. Last quarter, I think, was just over $1.4 billion. This would be a 10% increase plus, like 11 or 12% increase to last quarter's revenues. And last quarter was profitable. That was a big quarter. So if you just kind of get an idea of this is really, really big. Note here at the bottom, some of these revenue numbers I'm giving you are like what's called a net if you're into finance. So they're already kind of after expenses, or let's say after the cut to the Swifts, that kind of stuff. Some are what you call gross. So like food and beverage here, there's still an expense you'd have to then take back out to get to a profit number. Merch, same thing. This is before expenses. You don't usually do that when you're talking numbers, mixing net and gross. It's kind of a funny way to talk about numbers. So I just wanted you to know, but I'm really just saying all in all, kind of the number that AMC's getting in the till, at least after what they send to the Swifts, is like 151 million in this middle scenario with this 100 million opening weekend, 265 total. All right, let's share a couple more things. Try to move through quickly. We're almost done here. So I'm basically saying in Q4, this is a $265 million movie that is contributing $151 million of revenue to AMC. Reminder, that's that mix of net and gross. And here's an interesting note. If you think, man, retail, you're way underestimating this thing, it's going to be way bigger. If this thing, so I ran just some kind of what if, and plugged it, all of this I've been plugging back into, some of you know I've been forecasting AMC's earnings for a very long time, more than a year now, getting that relatively dialed in. That's an understatement. I've been very, very close quite a few quarters. If this movie, I guess I'm calling it a movie, I'm calling it a concert, I don't know what we want to call it, but it's a phenomenon. If this SWIFTQUAKE does 420 million domestic, I think it's going to flip AMC back to profits for Q4. Now that's a really big deal because I haven't updated you guys on my forecasts in a while. You know that I still believe we're profitable in Q3, but because Q4 with the writer's strike, Ghostbusters moved out, Dune moved out. I can't remember, but there's one or two other movies that moved out. Now they didn't move out far. They're still helping 2024, and so in terms of AMC's runway to success, it's not that bad. They didn't move that far out. But in terms of Q4 itself and the results, it had flipped us back to, I think, being at a loss. Uh, if this movie did $420 million in Q4, that's a lot. That's a big ask for a concert movie. But boy, Swifties are just making me. Let's put it this way: I'm not going to bet against it. I'm being honest with you that my number is not that. My number is at the top, that 265, and even that I think is pretty bullish. And I'm not positive. Maybe I should have been more conservative. But I'm just letting you know, if this turned into a $420 million movie, kind of Barbie level, not even Barbie level, that's 2/3 of Barbie basically, I think it'd flip us profitable for the quarter. So come on, Taylor, let's go, Swifties. All right, whatever the number is, we know a SWIFTQUAKE has hit. Watch out for the aftershocks, shorty. Let's go.